A single ransomware attack on one private fuel company shut down petrol supply across the entire US East Coast. It wasn't a military strike. It wasn't even a sanctions package. It was one criminal group against one company across 1 week of chaos. Now imagine that happening while your supply chain is already buckling under trade wars, climate disasters, and a cyber breach at your logistics partner, all at the same time. That is no longer a hypothetical. That is the operating environment we are in right now.
Coming up on Unbreakable Ventures, why the age of dealing with one crisis at a time is officially over, and what leading thinkers say you need to build instead. Plus, how nation-states are weaponizing ransomware against private businesses, not governments, and why your company might already be on someone's target list.
We have also got 5 quickfire stories, including Asia's hidden oil vulnerability, Malaysia's silent supply chain tsunami, and why a rare earth deal with China might not be worth the paper it is written on. Welcome to Unbreakable Ventures. I'm Ollie Law, and I'm joined by my colleague and resilience advisor, Umaima Babuji. You are listening to our fortnightly risk update, where we dive into emerging and current risks from around the world, focusing on some big stories and some you may have missed. We use the categories from the World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report to simplify the threats we're monitoring, but we also do some deep dives and interviews with industry peers. It's Wednesday the 20th of May, and we're covering the world's global threats over the last fortnight.
So grab a coffee and let's get into it.
Let me ask you something. When was the last time your business only had to deal with one problem at a time? If you are being honest, probably not since before 2020. And that is exactly the point behind a compelling new analysis from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Their argument is simple but powerful. Supply chain shocks no longer arrive sequentially. They emerge as continuous, concurrent, and cascading pressures. Think about that for a moment. We built our crisis management frameworks for a world where a disruption happens, you respond, you recover, and then the next one comes along. But that world does not exist anymore. Today, a pandemic overlaps with a trade war. A cyber attack hits while you are dealing with a climate disaster. A geopolitical escalation compounds a logistics failure you were already scrambling to fix. And each one of those disruptions feeds off the others. They amplify, they compound, they cascade. That is what ASPI calls systems of disruption. It is not a chain of individual events. It is an interconnected web where pulling one thread unravels everything. The World Economic Forum's 2025 Global Risks Report backs this up. Supply chain disruptions sit among the top risk over the next 2 years. But critically, they are compounded by geopolitical fragmentation, technological acceleration, and environmental instability, all happening in parallel. McKinsey research puts hard numbers on this. Companies can now expect supply chain disruptions lasting a month or longer every 3.7 years on average. The financial losses can represent significant chunks of annual revenue. But here is the part that really concerns me. We saw during the pandemic what happens when you expect your crisis team to run at surge capacity indefinitely. People burned out, decision quality degraded, institutional exhaustion set in precisely when the stakes were highest. And most organizations have still not structurally addressed that lesson. If your resilience strategy depends on the same 12 people working around the clock across overlapping emergencies, you are not building resilience. You are building a system designed to collapse under exactly the kind of pressure we now face routinely. So who should be paying attention to this? Honestly, probably everyone, especially board members, executives, and leadership teams. But let me be specific. Operations and supply chain leaders in multinational organizations, your crisis playbook probably assumes disruptions queue up neatly, but in reality, we all know they do not. Structural redesign of your response capacity is now urgent. C-suite executives and board members' concurrent disruptions compound financial exposure in ways your traditional risk register does not capture. If you are treating resilience as a supply chain department issue, you are underestimating the speed at which cascading failures erode enterprise value. Small and medium enterprises with limited redundancy, this is existential for you. Larger firms can absorb concurrent shocks through diversified suppliers and geographic spread. If you are running lean inventories with single source dependencies and a small crisis team, overlapping disruptions are not a stress test, they are a survival event. So what do you actually do about this? First, stress test against multiple simultaneous scenarios. Stop running single event tabletop exercises. Wargame overlapping disruptions. That is where the real bottlenecks and capacity gaps reveal themselves. Second, rotate your crisis leadership. Build tiered crisis teams with clear rotation schedules and delegated authority. No single group should bear continuous operational burden. Empower regional and functional leaders to act autonomously during compound emergencies. Third, embed resilience into daily operations. It should not be a plan you dust off during a crisis. Integrate scenario planning, supplier diversification reviews, and disruption simulations into your routine quarterly business processes. Make adaptive capacity institutional muscle memory. Fourth, invest in real-time visibility. Deploy supply chain monitoring tools that aggregate geopolitical, environmental, and operational risk signals into a single dashboard. Early detection of converging threats buys you lead time. And finally, build mutual aid networks. No organization can absorb continuous disruption alone. Establish pre-negotiated agreements with industry peers, logistics partners, and government agencies for resource sharing and coordinated response. The age of one crisis at a time is over. The organizations that will thrive are those designed for permanent turbulence, not temporary disruption.
You are listening to Unbreakable Ventures, a threat intelligence publication by FixInc. Subscribe today via unbreakableventures.com to receive free resource and deep dives from industry experts. Unbreakableventures.com, where resilience is about community and communication. Subscribe today.
Before we move on to our second threat update, we're sharing our quickfire emerging threats we've picked up throughout the week. These will be noteworthy stories we think you should know about, but less detailed than our two core threats analysed.
Asia's booming tech sector is generating impressive economic headlines, but underneath that growth sits a dangerous vulnerability. Energy-intensive manufacturing and logistics costs are climbing sharply amid the ongoing global oil crisis. The concern is that governments, riding the wave of strong tech performance, are delaying critical energy diversification. If oil disruptions deepen or tech demand softens at the same time, several Asian economies could be caught dangerously exposed.
Malaysia's Trade Minister Tengku Zafrul has issued a stark warning, describing supply chain disruptions as a silent tsunami hitting the nation in waves that are almost impossible to detect until the damage is done. Second and third order effects on Malaysian manufacturers and exporters are being underestimated, with smaller firms particularly vulnerable to input shortages and margin compression before policymakers can intervene.
A recent US-China rare earth agreement is being presented as progress, but the reality is far less reassuring. Beijing retains tight export controls over critical minerals essential to defense, electronics, and clean energy. Strategic dependency on Chinese rare earth processing persists despite the diplomatic optics, leaving Western manufacturers exposed to future supply weaponization during any geopolitical escalation.
New Zealand's agricultural sector is bracing for renewed tariff volatility as global trade negotiations stall and retaliatory measures accelerate. Exporters who adjusted to the initial tariff environment may be caught off guard by a second wave of escalation, compressing margins further at a time when input costs are already elevated and market access strategies are under strain.
The insurance brokers Willis Towers Watson has warned that political risk is migrating away from traditional conflict zones into contested economic and regulatory systems. Trade networks, sanctions regimes, and digital infrastructure governance are now the front lines. Businesses previously insulated from geopolitical exposure now face disruption through regulatory fragmentation and the politicization of supply chains, requiring a fundamental rethink of where political risk actually resides.
Further sources and references can be found in the footnotes of this podcast. But without further delay, I'll hand over to Umaima to take you through our second threat update this week.
So here is a question that might catch you off guard. Why would a nation-state bother attacking your business? You are not a government agency. You are not a defense contractor. You are just a company trying to operate. That is exactly the assumption state-backed hackers are counting on. A growing body of evidence and fresh analysis from industrial cyber highlights something deeply concerning. The line between state-sponsored espionage, sabotage, and financially motivated cybercrime has effectively dissolved. Groups linked to Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran are increasingly deploying ransomware not against government systems, but against private enterprises, energy companies, hospitals, logistics firms, manufacturers, businesses that form the backbone of national infrastructure. And the reason is brutally strategic. Why attack a government network with heavy defenses when you can cripple the private companies that millions of people depend on every single day? Let me give you some real examples that illustrate how serious this has become. In 2021, the Colonial Pipeline attack showed the world what happens when ransomware hits a single private fuel distributor. One company, one breach, and suddenly, petrol stations across the entire U.S. East Coast ran dry. Panic buying erupted. Emergency declarations were issued. The company reportedly paid a ransom of roughly $4.4 million just to get systems back online. That was not a military operation. That was a criminal group called DarkSide with suspected Russian links targeting a private business. In 2023, it happened in our part of the world. DP World Australia, one of the country's largest port operators, was hit by a cyber attack that paralyzed container operations at major ports across the country. For days, cargo could not move. Supply chains backed up. The disruption rippled through the Australian economy for weeks. Again, a private company, not a government department. And then there is the healthcare sector, which has been particularly devastated. In 2024, the Change Healthcare ransomware attack, attributed to the ALPHV or Black Cat Group with suspected Russian links, disrupted prescription processing and insurance claims for thousands of U.S. pharmacies and hospitals. Patient care was directly affected. Sensitive medical data of over 100 million individuals was exposed. Think about that. 100 million people's health records compromised because a single node in the healthcare value chain was breached. The pattern is clear. State-backed actors deliberately target private firms that control critical choke points. They know that disrupting one logistics provider, one energy distributor, one healthcare processor can paralyze services across an entire region or country. Cybersecurity agencies are sounding the alarm. Both CISA in the United States and the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre have issued repeated warnings that operational technology environments remain dangerously underprotected. Many industrial control systems run legacy software. Network segmentation is poor. And threat actors can move laterally from a compromised corporate email system directly into the systems that control physical infrastructure. So, who needs to be paying close attention here? If your company distributes fuel, processes medical claims, operates ports, or manages logistics networks, you are a strategic target regardless of your size. State-backed actors select victims based on systemic impact, not company profile. If you run operational technology or industrial control systems connected to corporate networks without robust isolation, your physical operations are exposed. That is the primary entry vector these groups exploit. And critically, if you are a small or mid-sized supplier to a larger critical infrastructure operator, you may be the weakest link they use to get in. State-backed actors increasingly exploit smaller vendors as entry points into bigger targets. Just as our first story highlighted the reality of concurrent cascading disruptions, this threat makes that reality worse. Imagine dealing with a supply chain crisis, a geopolitical escalation, and a state-backed ransomware attack on your systems all at the same time. That is not science fiction. That is the threat environment we are now operating in. So what should you be doing? First, segment your operational technology networks from corporate IT. Implement strict separation so that a compromised email account cannot become a pathway into the systems controlling your physical operations. Second, go beyond generic cyber drills. Run tabletop exercises that simulate state-backed ransomware scenarios where attackers have nation-state resources, persistence, and strategic patience. Test whether your organization can maintain operations under sustained, sophisticated attack. Third, audit your supply chain cyber dependencies. Map every third-party vendor with access to your systems. Assess their cybersecurity maturity. Enforce minimum security standards contractually. Your weakest supplier is your most likely entry point. Fourth, maintain offline, immutable backups of critical systems and data. State-backed groups increasingly target backup infrastructure to maximize leverage. Air-gapped copies are a non-negotiable defense layer. And finally, engage with national cybersecurity agencies. Register with CISA, the NCSC, or your country's equivalent. Receive timely threat advisories. Participate in industry-specific information sharing. Collective early warning intelligence is one of the most effective defenses available to you. State-backed ransomware is not just a government problem. It is a direct and growing threat to private businesses everywhere. And the companies that recognize this and prepare accordingly will be the ones still operating when the next attack hits.
That's it for today's update. If you need help navigating these threats or building a plan to protect your business, the same advisors who collate these insights are here to help. Head over to unbreakableventures.com to book a complimentary chat online with one of them. And if you found this resource useful, consider subscribing to Unbreakable Ventures or sharing the article with your network. After all, resilience is about community and communication. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, stay safe.
Unbreakable Ventures is brought to you by the Senior Advisory Team at Fixing, a boutique resilience advisory based in the Oceania, ASEAN and India regions. Special thanks to our sponsor and Europe's leading SaaS provider for resilience software, F24. Our resources are researched and published by industry specialists across New Zealand, Australia, Malaysia and the UK. This podcast provides advice and opinion on disaster recovery and the threat landscape. The content is not a substitute for expert guidance during a crisis. Unbreakable Ventures is trademarked by Fixing Consulting Partners, a Fixing Group company.